Hi, Diego Gonzalez from the Samsung Developer Relations team here. We're going to be talking today about how to create a virtual reality web application. Stay tuned. This is the companion screencast to the article in Net Magazine titled Create a Virtual Reality Web App by Peter O'Shaughnessy, a fellow developer advocate at Samsung. And do remember that if you want to keep up to date with what's going on in the world of web development, follow us at @sbrowserdevrel for the Samsung Developer Relations Twitter account. So let's get started. So when we talk about VR, we're probably picturing gaming or other more immersive cinematic experiences. It is no wonder that VR has been called the ultimate empathy machine, but what many people don't know is that you can actually achieve VR in a web browser. And the enthusiasm is quite high. There are several browsers that are already WebVR ready. One of them, the Samsung Internet Browser for the Gear VR. A little bit of history. WebVR is currently being maintained and developed by a community group of the W3C, and it consists of a JavaScript API that is able to expose VR devices to the web browser. Each browser has its own way of enabling WebVR, but once it's enabled, we can create immersive content that will run directly inside the browser. There are a set of tools available that allow us to create VR experiences. We can create VR experiences in WebGL, 3JS, or A-Frame. Right now, we are going to be focusing on A-Frame to create these tools, and we're going to see how easy it is. So now we're going to dive into the application that was developed by Peter, and we're going to see how he created this application. If we go into our example, we see that the final application consists of a virtual environment that has this carousel full of llama images. Things to notice: we are getting interactions once we click. We are also getting surrounded by this kind of skybox, which is a circular image that is just all around us. So no matter where we see, and in order to move and see, we just drag and drop. We have this image, which gives a lot of depth and immersion to the whole application. Also, the whole dragging and moving, and we can move with the WASD keys. And all of this is already supported by just adding a scene into the HTML page. Finally, the inclusion of this button here that we're seeing on the corner is the goggles, the WebVR mode. Once we enter the WebVR mode, then we're going to be able to, for example, if we're looking at the website in phone, then we're going to be able to take the phone, put it in a Gear VR, put it in a Google Cardboard or similar or other similar headset, and we're going to enter into this VR mode where we have the barrel transformations and we have the side-by-side stimuli. So all of this just comes baked into the A-frame scene. We just need to add this tag and we can just start adding our content. So we're going to explore more, how do we create these type of experiences? So when we open the file, the index.html file, we can see several things. We have the structure of the HTML page and we have the scripts. In the script section, we can see that there are some components that are imported. There are external components that can be reused, like the A-frame layout component and the A-frame lookat component. Then we have a couple of components that were created by ourselves, the flicker search and the rotate on click. And finally, something that's an entity or a primitive, which we will see later. This is quite interesting because it can show that we are able to reuse components that are being created in the community. There are several repositories for components, such as the one that we have in GitHub or the one that are spread across the web. Then, upon entering the body, we can see that there's a scene tag. So I'm just going to remove the elements that are inside the scene tag for a moment. And we can see that this scene tag is the one that right now will be the one in charge of creating the WebVR icon and enabling everything that the boilerplate used to have. So in this scene is where we are going to start putting all the different elements that are going to be creating the VR scene. I'm going to pop back in the elements that were there. And we can see that we have some assets. And in this assets, we have an image. That's the skybox. This is the one that's going to be surrounding us. Important thing is that the images that are going to be in the assets, or audio, for example, or any file that is going to be in the assets, are going to be preloaded before the scene. So this is a good way to make sure that whatever we need is going to be there inside the it's going to be already preloaded before we use it. Now we can see some flicker carousel thing. This tag is pretty much a primitive, which we're going to see in a few minutes. And then we're going to define some environment elements like the camera, which is necessary to give us the cursor. So here we're putting a camera and a cursor, which is the black circle that we are seeing on the screen. It's important to note that this cursor can be modified and change its color, shape, and it can be defined by ourselves as well. Finally, an element that's the sky, which has the source, and we can see that the source is linking to the skybox, which is the asset that was defined. So we have here the sky, which has the skybox as the source, and we are giving it a position and a rotation. So very, very clearly we have two main elements, which would be the skybox and the carousel. So we're going to see now exactly how is this carousel defined and how are the components defined. But first, we need to know that A-frame follows the entity component system pattern. And in this pattern, we have a set of entities onto which we are going to add components, and these components are going to define behavior, they're going to define appearance, and they're going to define pretty much anything that we want to do with that component. So if we see at the slide now, we can see that we are going to represent these entities in a HTML tag way. So in this case, we're going to have an entity and we're going to have component 1, component 2, component n. And each component is going to define its attributes as, let's say, similar notation to CSS attributes. So in the Flickr search component, what we can see is that we have a couple of methods that are just going to get the images from Flickr, and they're going to create the DOM elements for the image themselves. They're going to generate the images. Special interest, we are setting an attribute that's called look at, which is another component that we are going to be creating right next to this one. And what's really of our interest here is that A-frame, we are registering this component, which is called Flickr search, and it is actually defining a schema, which the schema is going to be the, we can call it like the body. So it's going to define what are the attributes that this component is going to have and what are the default values that it's going to have once created. Apart from that, we have a couple of lifecycle events init update, so we really need to do something when the carousel is loading or when the carousel is updating, then we just code them. The rest is pretty much just JavaScript, so we can process the images, get the images, and create the DOM elements with the other couple of methods that we defined before. So if we look into the rotate on click, this is another component, and see that this component itself is defining a behavior. It's the one that's saying when we are clicking, we want this to rotate. So again, we have register a component, and this register component comes with a schema and, or the body, and this body is going to be, in this case, degrees, rotation, just some default values also assigned to them. And we're going to have as well the init function and the onClick here, which is one of the ones that we are interested in because it's the one that's going to enable the rotation from JavaScript. Now, this rotation is being done with the tween object that it's already included in A-frame. Something very interesting is that A-frame includes tween objects and it also includes a 3JS object. So if we actually wanted to tap into the object 3D that's inside the component that we are building, we could as well do that and start playing with the underlying 3JS of the component. So we can see how few lines of code can actually get a VR environment already working. And just to finalize, what we're going to do is we're going to take sound and we're going to put it to the click event. So every single time we click on the carousel, it's going to move and it's going to make a llama cry. So I'm going to have I have the files here. I am going to put them into the carousel with the sound component, and we're going to finish this example. And there we go. We have a carousel that once you click on it, you have rotation and you have the llama cry sound. And if you consider the amount of code that was required to do this, it is quite impressive that we can actually use now web technologies to create VR experiences, all in a blink of an eye.